What is up, sexy people of the internet? It is Dave. It is Duncan, wearing the Filth t-shirt. Back for another album review. And for this review, Duncan and I have been checking out the new album from Chicago legendary metallic hardcore band Racetraitor. The band's new album, Creation and the Timeless Order of Things, will be released on November 17th via Good Fight Music. Formed in 1996.
Oh.
That's right.
Oh.
The band continued to be at the forefront of experimental hardcore, as sonically and politically charged as ever. The 13 songs on Creation and the Timeless Order of Things focus on fighting for liberation from the oppressive systems that destroy humanity and the Earth, while creating a geographic autobiography of Racetraitor. With the album originally set to be completed in 2020, as for the for-profit medical infrastructure failed to protect the populations of Earth, the band, like many others, didn't finish the record as planned. Instead, this inspired Racetraitor to look at what they wanted to achieve sonically in a new light, creating a sound that is heavier, more psychedelic, and more worldly all at once. The band also took this time to have friends record additional vocals on the album, including contributions from Dennis Lixon from Refused, Tim Kinsella of Joan of Arc and Cap'n Jazz, Stan Lezawacki, Terminal Nation,
Say it
and
twice.
Sankit Lama from Chipang, to name a few, plus Ethan Lee McCarthy from Primitive Man contributing a noise track. The lyrical themes of Creation and the Timeless Order of Things follow similar themes as our other songs, namely songs about fighting for liberation from the oppressive systems that destroy humanity and the Earth, but the approach is different. In the past, people seemed more interested in our story as a band than the themes we sing about, so I tried to create an album that bridges that. You have seen and experienced what we have seen and experienced that makes us the people and band we are. What we came up with is a sort of geographic autobiography of Racetraitor. The songs are about specific locations and events, people or experiences in those locations that influenced our beliefs and inspired us as individuals and as a band. There are places that our families are from, places that we have lived or worked, and through these geographies we can talk about all sorts of socio-political issues, from exploitation of migrant workers to domestic violence to indigenous rights. The end result is a much more personal record. Creation and the Timeless Order of Things was written and produced by Racetraitor, recorded at Electrical Audio by Greg Norman, Paint by Numbers by Stuart Sykes, and Void Dawn by Dan Benai. Mixed by Greg Norman at Studio Greg Studios, and mastered at Audio Siege by Brad Boatwright.
We love you, Brad.
Every week, got to mention Brad Boatwright. Also, fun fact.
Is it a fun fact though?
Maybe.
Or is it a Dave fact?
You
Dave
decide.
facts are not always fun facts. The sticks used on this drum, I don't care about that. You know what I mean?
Did you
It's
know?
a Davey fact though.
The band's drummer, Andrew Hurley, is also the drummer in Fall Out Boy. But he's been in this band since about 97, so before he joined Fall Out Boy. So, there you go.
Is that a real fact?
That's a real fact, Duncan. True story. Cheers to
I
that.
know he's got some of the. I saw him. What was the? Did he not? There's a video that goes around where does he not go on stage and drum for Behemoth or some weird shit like that? He plays a song with a band you would never expect him to play with, and holds his own.
Right.
So this now makes a lot more sense.
Right.
Did not know that. That is, Dave. I wouldn't say it's a fun fact. I would say it's an educational, interesting one. It's also entertaining, edutainment, if you like.
Edutainment. So, Racetraitor. Before I listened to this album in full, I'd heard one of the singles. I went back and checked out their previous release. It's called 2042. It came out in 2018.
False advertising, getting numbers.
But fuck me, that album hits like a motherfucking truck, Duncan. It is 21 minutes of just utterly visceral, blasting hardcore. Just no holds barred chaos. So I was excited to check this album out. From listening to 2042, I was like, yeah, stylistically, this sounds like it could be right up my street. I also was kind of surprised that I'd never come across this band before, being that they've been on the go since the kind of mid to late 90s.
Plus, like, in your overall sphere of interest, like, this like, even listening to like the first 30 seconds, I was kind of like, oh, it's a Dave pick. Like, there's no ambiguity here. This is Dave's wheelhouse. It's a small wheelhouse. Can't all get a seat in the wheelhouse, but keep spinning.
Okay. I'm interested to hear what you thought of it, though. Actually.
Oh, how dare you!
What did you make of the new Racetraitor album?
Well, let me tell you something.
Tell me something. Tell me.
It's fucking raw, Dave. It's fucking raw. It's like what happens when you are making a lovely paella, right? You accidentally slice the top of your finger off, but you've already sliced the lemon as well, and your finger just touches that acidity, and you are effing blind and seeing and being without like a breath. You're constructing a sweary sentence, which is full of really interesting swears, but no words that bring them together to make a formidable sentence. I'll tell you what is really interesting about Racetraitor is how much they keep you on your toes during the runtime. I mean, there's one element here, which it's interesting that they're kind of... I always like bands that are pitched a particular way from the press statement to how I interpret them. Hardcore isn't necessarily where I was leaning with this, if I'm honest. It's in there. It's got a very nasty kind of Blackened streak to it, which like makes my heart sing, because Blackened elements on albums, I think, are the best way to use that genre. But I think there's a little bit of kind of snarly death metal in here as well. And there's a hardcore element, but it's hardcore not necessarily in the way that we know it. It's kind of like a savage 90s kind of hardcore blended in with these Blackened elements. This fucking Descent into Hell production and this, like death metal-y kind of 90s vibe going over the top of it. But the band itself are really, really smart at the switch up between tracks. Like all those genres I've mentioned already, whether it be black metal, hardcore, or death metal, can in theory become a bit samey. Like you can run the danger of a one-dimensional sounding album in any of those genres. What Racetraitor seem to be able to do with relative ease is switch up those elements very creatively. And as a result, you get tracks that hit you with a runtime akin to something in the grind, through to longer tracks. Wait for it, ladies and gents. About 3 minutes long. Oh, yeah, bastard. Who's got the time, Dave? Who has the time? Where what they give you is kind of snarly Blackened death metal elements before hitting you with like space. And it's interesting you mentioned the geographical element, because I just assumed they were from like some Middle Eastern country or kind of towards the Mediterranean, from the use of the instrumentation non-specific to metal, like the kind of almost the kind of rural folkiness of like an Egypt or something that kind of weaves its way through intersections, or even the guitars at times when they go clean to give you these like very discordant, unsettling melodies. It's an album that actually is surprisingly rewarding in its construction and its pace. It's 13 tracks. It's just over half an hour long. It really, really, really doesn't spend too much time labouring any points. Vocally, this is about as raw as it gets. Well, this guy is either in pain all the way through this, or he's recording in a cave. whilst falling backwards. You know, he's just been this is Spartan in a well. You know what I mean? Oh, like it's like slow motion vocals. I love it. It's very reminiscent of kind of that 90s death metal, and less hardcorey. Although it's more of a shout,
Yeah.
but it's produced like a 90s death metal vocal. It's a weird combination, but it's utterly savage. It's like, and it's full of venom all the way through. Every delivery is just the most savage way to say that word.
Yeah.
And I kind of love it because of that. On top of that, you've got this kind of eerie, reverby, clean guitar against this kind of roomy, almost black metal-y, like, not lo-fi, but it's edging on the lo-fi guitar production, and this big, like, church hall drum sound.
Yeah.
And all those elements together probably shouldn't work nearly as well as they do, and it's one of the reasons that I always come back to. You can do things in the Blackened realm and produce it so you can pick out all the instrumentation. If you're not doing that, you're lazy as fuck. There's a real good switch up in pacing here, whether it's from tracks like Caves of the Patriarchs, with a runtime just a little under 3 minutes, and tracks like Pastoral Monolith, which hit you with like almost blast beat savagery, through to tracks like Subordinate Terror, which is even shorter, but actually hold back a little bit more and give you more. The layers and the production are really, really, really well handled. Once again, everything comes through without sounding overproduced, comes through nice and clear to pick out. And I actually think the kind of the back half of the album is like the more rewarding part. It's the bit that I feel gets more experimental and kind of more playful with design, structure, and layering. It also rewards you with some of the longer tracks, which prove that the band can go a bit longer. Closing track, Pangea Proxima, is a little under 5 minutes long, and it's really, really well constructed, and it builds up at an interesting pace and delivers a whole lot of bang for your buck, to the point where you'd almost be forgiven for thinking you would, like, your album had skipped onto the next thing, because it's so measured and temperate. My negative on this one is that I do feel with all those creative elements and everything that you do get, the band tend to settle into a very similar kind of execution on verses. I think when you get to choruses and interludes, they really, really jazz things up and go different directions, but they do have a tendency to do the kind of really rapid, bass drum pedal, really almost kind of quasi black metal kind of blast, shreddy guitar over a verse. Maybe one too many times for me. It's not off-putting by any stretch of imagination. The album's short enough that it can carry it. But when you can hear what else they do, where you get those big, slow, chunky death metal elements, or kind of those slamming hardcore parts, it does make me think that switching some of those elements up in the construction of like a verse, for example, and maybe flipping it on its head and giving you something a bit more blackened and savage on a chorus could work. But then there's a lot of tracks here that don't form like the kind of standard ABC kind of format. So maybe that's a deliberate choice, and maybe that's why it stands out as much. It's a really rewarding re-listen as well. I found, like, on re-listens, I was attracted more to some of the instrumentation, which is out with the band's standard sound. And very much like yourself, surprised I hadn't come across these guys before. You would think if they have a drummer in maybe one of the biggest pop punk bands of the last 20 years, we'd know about this. I mean, we knew all about the damn things. Like, that was all over our radar, and that's not just because the Every Time I Die frontman was in the band. It was because Fallout, and there was a guitarist and a drummer, I think, in that band, and it was all over everywhere. So yeah, it's a really, really interesting listen. It's deeply unpleasant, like, which I think is what they're going for. It's one of those ones that is it's a difficult recommend, but it's actually, if you can carve out half an hour where you're not trying to concentrate on something else, you can blitz into this and really start picking out a ton of influences, styles, and It is very worldy. I think from the brief that they set out, not thinking about it until you put it in context, it does hit a lot of those marks. So yeah, I don't know if I'm fully behind Racetraitor to the point where I'm like, this, if there is one Blackened, hardcore album you hear this year, make it Racetraitor. But at the same time, as a band I knew nothing about, it gave me like a lot more than I was expecting. Like, especially from the first two tracks, I kind of felt like after Id into CamelCon, I was like, all right, I kind of know what I'm getting here. And then about 3 songs later, I was like, oh, bets are off. like up is down, left is right, the sky is green, the grass is blue. What are we doing here? Cats and dogs living together. It throws a lot at you. It's surprisingly measured for doing that as well, which is in itself a skill that only comes with years of experience.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Interesting.
Dave, for a man that went and did the research, backtracked through the catalogue, and then swung into this one here, I kind of got the feeling halfway through it, this felt very much like a Davey-like. So I'm curious to see if it continued to be a Davey-like album, or if it was a... Davey has thoughts.
It was not entirely what I was expecting, because I'd heard the previous album. This is obviously still very much an intense album, but a completely different beast from 2042. But I mean, it's been like 5 years since that album, so things were probably going to change. The album opens up with Eid, which, as you may expect from the kind of title of the track, it has that kind of Middle Eastern flavour to it. I was kind of trying to pick out the instrument on there. I wasn't sure. It's maybe like an oud, or the other instrument that's used quite a lot is the qanun. Both quite similar in sounds. I wasn't sure which one it was, but they also bring in some really some kind of strings into that track as well to really darken the tone of the track. But it's still like evolves into that kind of Racetraitor ferocity that you've like previously heard on other albums. But it's not just that track, like that darkness is pretty much there like the whole album, and it's something that they didn't really do a huge amount of on the previous album. The last album was more just kind of like ferocious kind of hardcore, with little bits of experimentation. This feels like they've really went for it on this album. I think that menacing streak they've got on this is even more potent than on any release they've had out so far. And we kind of mention them on pretty much every third review, but I did get huge kind of waves of Will Haven on this. Like it had that kind of Will Haven kind of bleakness about it. There's just a kind of like a miserable atmosphere that kind of coats this album.
It's a cloak of despair.
Yeah,
pass me my
100%.
Cloak of despair, so I might sit in my corner of misery.
Yeah, 100%. And it just kind of lures you in. You could maybe you could also throw maybe LLNN into that similarity as well, but unlike Will Haven or like the last LLNN album, this has a more kind of raw, energetic intensity to it. The tempo of these tracks are fairly full on, weaving between hardcore, kind of crust punk, bit of grind, but as you said, you've also got that kind of streak of black metal in there as well, which is quite cool. I quite like that. It never really presents itself as a main style on the album, but on tracks like Camilacon or Cave of the Patriarchs, you can hear it in that kind of like tremolo guitar style, and it is obviously coupled up with blasts a lot of the time, and this kind of like really kind of eerie kind of lead work as well sitting in the background. So like when you bring all of those styles together, it certainly makes this album the most varied thing they've done to date. When they're taking that kind of like hardcore grindy foundation and then just sprinkling on these little additions of black metal and even kind of like a kind of doomy feel as well. And it really just gives you that kind of a much wider like palette of sounds to really enjoy on the album. But they're fused really well. I really enjoyed the kind of the balance throughout this. It's spot on. Nothing felt like it was like overpowering anything. And I think those little extra kind of Middle Eastern parts, the instrumentation they used, and those kind of deep strings as well, I felt like it definitely gave this album a bit more depth. there's always something kind of lingering in the background with this one, you know, whether it's like something for atmospheric purposes or, you know, trying to shift the kind of tone of the track, which, to be honest, is never really upbeat. This is like a fairly misery-soaked listen that you'll feel every second of.
Yeah, you don't listen to this album if you just got that promotion you've been working hard for. You know what I mean?
No. Birthday celebrations, let's get the Racetraitor album on. Like color wise, this was like a very, very kind of grey or black album for me. Like that's the kind of colours I was getting. There was no real like vibrant colours on this. Like maybe a little bit on the closing track, which wasn't a happy sounding track per se, but I felt like some of the chord choices were maybe a bit more kind of spiritual sounding. Some of the chord choices, not all of the chord choices, by the way, because it still ends in like that like harrowing fashion. Vocally, it also kind of sits on this kind of like weird bridge of like part kind of hardcore shouts, but I felt like the way that he was delivering it had this like black metal type agony to it. Like that was the kind of like feeling that was coming across. I really like I like his delivery on this. You can feel that like anguish in his voice. And you can tell that what he's singing about is coming from a really personal place. Structure-wise, like as you said, the songs are fairly short for the most part. There's things like 4 tracks go above like the 3-minute like mark on these on the album. The rest are all like a mix between 1 minute and 3 minutes. So even though the kind of lyrical topics and musical tones of the album can be quite dark, it moves fairly quickly through each track. They never really linger too long on anything, which does kind of like keep things moving forward. On the flip side, that kind of jarring style and having so much experimentation does, like when I finished the album, I was just like, what the fuck actually just happened there? Like I had no idea what had actually went on, and I'm fine with that. I wasn't expecting like punk pop choruses on this, you know what I mean? Like, but I did feel like when I listened to it, I was like, I'm going to need a break from that before I go back in for another listen. But you know, it's not supposed to be a feel good album.
No, hell not. No.
I think I felt like I was supposed to feel after it ended, to be honest. I did though. There's a track on it called Cape Rarenga, which I really liked. It's the kind of more melodic
it's the one
track
that kind of goes a bit more stonery and like it's soaked in a bit more melody.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool.
Even the guitars are kind of spacey and reverby and it's long kind of droned out chords, and it's cool. It's one of the longer tracks, which is really, it's the longer tracks are the ones that afford them that opportunity to really experiment. It's hard to do that in a minute track, you know, maybe you're like, let me do verse chorus here, the track's a bit done, lads.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the kind of the break from the chaos on the album. That track, I thought was really cool. I love how they've continued with similar themes to previous albums, but they've kind of packaged and delivered this in a completely different way. The kind of architecture, I suppose, of the album feels bigger. It feels more crafted with various layers, different instrumentation, and there's a different kind of sense of mood on this as well. More profound in a way, I suppose. And while I really enjoyed 2042, I think this release has more personality over it, even more than they had before. I'm not sure it'll be an album that I reach for on a regular basis, because
unless you're having a really bad month, like your websites went down, your internet's been patchy. I'm not saying that's happened to you today, you know what I mean? But yeah. I see what you're saying, Dave.
I was in the frame of mind for it today. Let's just say that, yeah. It does. It's one of those albums that kind of leaves you feeling a certain way. Not like full of sunshine and rainbows, but
no.
But there's also something really captivating about it as well. I love the production as well. I thought it was really cool. I like the, as you said, the kind of part of it that feels a little bit kind of lo-fi. I thought it was really nice. It really suited the kind of style of their music. So I enjoyed the single, but I got probably more from the full album than I was expecting. I didn't really expect it to be this experimental. Scores for the new Racetraitor album. What are you thinking?
I am coming at a 3.5 for this one. A whole hell of a lot that I like.
Yeah.
Like I say, I think it's a bit of a mood piece, and there's no getting around that. When I'm in the mood, like I can't imagine me ever just picking one or two songs on this. This is we'll sit down and listen to the full album. It's an experience sort of thing. That experience is on the bleaker side. Personally, I would change a couple of things about maybe some of the tracks. I actually think they could shove maybe one or two slightly longer songs in there and really open that experimentation. However, it's not my fucking band. I didn't record it, so I'll shut the fuck up when it comes to that. It's their vision, and I think they deliver it really, really well. They're on my radar now, for sure, which kind of feels weird to say that about a band that have been on the go almost 30 years. But they're on my radar now, Dave. So yeah, 3.5 out of 5 from me.
Nice. I'm a 4 out of 5 on this one. Yeah, I enjoyed it. As I said, I got more from it than I was expecting. I liked the experimentation. Sometimes I felt there's maybe too much experimentation. Just when I got to the end, I was a bit like, there was bits of it stuck with me. Other bits I was like, I need to go back and kind of digest that a bit more. But I feel like this is a band that whatever they do next, it probably won't sound like this. I think they'll probably be a band that kind of evolves their sound again on the next one and comes back with something different again. So I'm looking forward to hearing whatever they do next. But yeah, I would check this out if you like hardcore, but kind of sprayed with various other kind of genres, a little bit of kind of Blackened stuff in there as well, or a bit kind of doomy. Definitely give this a listen. There's a lot to enjoy on this. So I'm a 4 out of 5 on this one from the new Racetraitor album. It comes out on November 17th on Good Fight Music. I'll link some links. I'll put some links below.
I'll link some links.
Link some links to
you
the
like
band.
my links, you linky links.
To the band, to the pre-order. You can check them out, have a listen, let us know what you think. That's the review. Thanks for checking out. We'll be back with another review very soon, but until then, take care. Speak to you soon.
Bye, everyone.
Ocean!